Hey there, I'm Katie Cat, and this is our weekly AstroTarot for October 6th. Although, by the cards that have shown up on the table, I'm going to go ahead and say that it goes to the 15th because that's when we're going to be experiencing one of the transits that is currently being highlighted in the reading for this week. And as always, if you want to have a better understanding of how these planetary transits influence your personal chart, I did create a video a couple of weeks ago just explaining that a little bit more, just in generality. And if you'd like to have a closer look with the personal reading, feel free to reach out to me at rootsofalchemy@gmail.com or order a reading through rootsofalchemy.com. I also do accept donations. I appreciate donations a lot for my weekly free readings, especially as I've been in this place of getting geared up to move and not knowing if I have to move. For months now. And so it's been a little stressful. And of course, financially, it helps to support my projects like printing my tarot cards, which if you're interested in getting a set of your own, they are also available at rootsofalchemy.com. You can purchase them there. I also have some upcoming classes over the winter. So if you're interested in those, feel free to reach out so you can be on the mailing list for those. I just need to get a little settled because, when you move, or have the idea of having to move at the forefront of your life, it can be pretty stressful. And it's hard to root down into any projects when things are unknown. So that's where I've been at. I'm still kind of up in the air with a lot of things. So it tends to be where things are at for a lot of people by way of the cards that were pulled for today. Before I jump into those cards, I'm going to go ahead and take a walkabout by way of where the planets are currently placed in the sky so you can have a better idea of what's happening and how these planets are being aspected by one another. So first off, let's go ahead and start on the eastern horizon over here with the sun at 13 degrees of Libra. We have Mercury close to the sun. It's at 17 degrees of Libra, so they're pretty much in close conjunction. If we walk around the zodiac wheel, we will see that we have Venus at it's at 16 degrees of Scorpio currently. We have the moon at 22 degrees of Scorpio. Then we have Pluto over here at 29 degrees of Capricorn. It's currently retrograde. It will be coming out of retrograde in November. We have Saturn over here in Pisces, currently in retrograde. Neptune also over here in Pisces. It's at 29 degrees, I think 28 degrees currently, also retrograde. And then we have Chiron in Aries. We have our north node currently in the beginning degrees of Aries and our south node placed in the opposite sign of Virgo. And then we have the planet Jupiter over here in Gemini, as well as Uranus over here in Taurus. Uranus is at currently 26 degrees of Taurus. And then we have Mars up here in the sign of Cancer. So if we watch how the sun moves through the sky and see it when it comes upon its setting space, tonight you will be able to see the planet Venus as well as the waxing moon just beyond it on the western sky. And then as we approach closer to midnight, you would see Mars come up on the eastern horizon. And then you would also be able to see Jupiter, provided that you don't have any clouds or, big trees or anything in the way of your line of sight. Now, let's go ahead and, first, I just want to go ahead and point out, based on these placements, if you happen to notice this close positioning between Venus and the moon, which is closing in on a 180-degree angle with Uranus. Venus will be in opposition to Uranus, I believe on the 15th of this month, to be exact, between the 14th and 15th of this month. And that's actually what's getting highlighted in this week's tarot. Now, consider that Uranus is the planet of change, unexpected change in outward conditions that have prevented us from progressing in some area of our lives. And Uranus is currently in the sign of Taurus, which is a sign of our belief systems and our values and our resources and agricultural things. So some kind of big shift could be on the horizon here, and it's being aspected in this opposite relationship to Venus. So you might see very new beginnings come upon your life by way of relationship because of that Venus-Uranus opposition. But they also could be very fast-moving relationships because those fast-moving relationships are influenced by Uranus. They could also be a little different than you're used to, and they also could be fleeting. So it's important to take the experience for what it is, but it could be bringing a lot of change and reconsideration around your value systems because of that opposition between Uranus and Venus by placement of the sky. Now it's going to show up in your life, particularly on the axis of that Scorpio Taurus axis, and consider that those are two fixed signs, which means that they are both stubborn in nature. Taurus is stubborn in its value system, and Scorpio is stubborn by way of its emotions and its depth of feeling. And so this will be stirring something up in some way and in some light. So look for those changes that are showing up in your life. Now, let's jump into the cards for this week. Our opening card for the week is the Eight of Pentacles. So we see someone who is working on a workshop table. They are shaping a coin in front of them, and they have these 5 coins placed like, prize plates on the wall behind them. And then a little window is in the background where we can see a little spider web that is kind of making the connective dots in different anchors of our lives in the universe. Now, the Eight of Pentacles is more about being the master craftsman, or I should say the apprentice craftsman. This is someone who is refining a skill and working on something that they are putting efforts to on a daily basis. Now, it is in the suit of coins or pentacles, so it's around something that we value. It also could be particularly around building some kind of financial stability or some kind of financial outcome. Now, it is a number 8, which is leaning into the idea and sense of time and cyclical nature around this. So it's reminding us that if there's something that we want to build toward, it can take small, disciplined, repeated efforts through time to actually refine something and work towards some skill that we can acquire and be a master of in time. Now, this is being followed by the challenge of the Fool. And the reason why I walked through the card or the zodiac wheel first is because the Fool is a card that signals the planet of Uranus of unexpected change. And we're going to be seeing that opposition between Uranus and particularly Venus. Now, more quickly, it will be the moon, because the moon is the fastest moving celestial body, but it moves through each sign in about 2.5 days. So it will be out of the sign of Scorpio by tomorrow. So tomorrow is the 7th, and the moon will already be in the beginning degrees of Sagittarius. So the larger aspect or transit that's happening is going to be that opposition between Venus and Uranus. And it's showing up as a challenge because this change or this unexpected kind of shift in circumstance is having us reconsider our footing. And when we look at the card of the Fool, we can see someone who is walking toward a precipice without any fear. Now, the Kabbalah word that is associated with this card is Aleph, which is the breath and life of God. So it's reminding us that when you are faced with the unknown, it's important to follow your heart, because that's ultimately going to be what guides you and is the inspiration of God by way of you being a conduit in this life. And when I say the word God, I don't necessarily mean Christian God or, the Buddhist God or any God that is associated with any religion. I speak of God in a term that is all and everything. It's the water that we drink. It's the air that we breathe. It's the fire that warms us. It's the earth within our body. It's the universe, and everything around us in its full capacity is all and everything and is God. And so it's that which is inspiring us to be present in this life and to follow our heart and move toward that which is calling us without fear. Now, the way we move through the challenge shows up as kind of a card of isolation. We have the 8 of Cups. So we see 3 cups stacked on top of each other and another 5 in a separate stack, and a person who is walking away from these cups, apparently up into the mountains. So they're going into a place where they are having some kind of emotional contemplation. They're reviewing something. And this doesn't surprise me because we have those energies of Venus and Uranus. And when there is upheaval, it turns us into a place of, going into the undercurrent if we want to see, a mirrored relationship by way of our surroundings and our environment. We go into the emotional world and we turn things over with our mind and continue to look at those emotional depths. It is like being in an undercurrent, and sometimes we have to remove ourselves from external influences to actually see where we're at. And so we see this person who's separating themselves from both, the highs and the lows of a situation, and they're asking themselves, like, are the good days, do they outweigh the bad days, and are they worth it even though there's also bad days? And they're kind of going into this internal review, and they're doing that because of this great change. Now, the ultimate outcome showed up with a Knight of Cups, which is a card of caution. And it's interesting when I consider the element of water and the element of water throughout the landscape of our world. And sometimes that current can be very rushed, like it's something like river rafting, and sometimes it's like a slow meandering stream. And so this is asking us to have caution and be aware of our surroundings and when we can cross that body of water, because we see that this knight is being cautious as they approach this small stream in front of them. And they're taking every step very purposely with their heart and their vulnerability leading the way. Now, that is further clarified by the single ace of swords, which is a card of clear communication, a card of clarity, quite literally. With a single sword, we can cut through any cloud of illusion, we can cut through any BS, because we have a sense of what is real and what is true, and that can come through by clarification with communication or an idea or something that is communication minded, because it is in the suit of swords. Now, that is further clarified by the Four of Cups. So we have a lot of cups on the table today. And honestly, we have one of each of the different suits, but there is a lot of energy around the realm of relationship that's on the table for this week. And that's because of this kind of seesaw tug of war pull by way of energy between the planet of Uranus and the planet of Venus. Uranus being in Taurus and Venus being in the sign of Scorpio. Of course, if you have strong placements in either of those signs or in either of the other two fixed signs by way of Aquarius or Leo, then you will be feeling this pull by this relationship as well, because whenever there is a opposition or a square in the fixed signs, those can be especially hard because people who have a lot of fixed signs in their nature can tend to avoid change. And so changes can be very big and very shifting when it comes to people that have a lot of fixed planets in their charts. And that can even be if you aren't necessarily the sun sign of Scorpio, Taurus, Aquarius, or Leo. Like, you might have your moon in one of those signs. You might have your Mercury in one of those signs, or your Venus, or your Mars, or one of the other planets that's aspected by these planetary placements. And so they will create some kind of influence or some kind of reflection in your life in light of the planet that it's aspecting, which I think is always really interesting, especially when I look back at things that have happened in my life in hindsight. Now, you can also look at things that have happened historically, especially with the outer planets, because, for instance, in 1941, Uranus was also in the sign of Taurus. And we also had Jupiter, I believe, in the sign of Gemini. And so you might want to look back at that time and see what was going on then that could be similar to things that are happening now. And if you don't want to look at the history aspect of it in that way, you can also look at the history of your own life with some of these planets that have shorter cycles, like Jupiter, who has a 12-year cycle, or Saturn, that has a 28.5 year, 29-year cycle. So these cycles show up in our lives to bring back certain truths and bring up things that have been kind of settled in the bottom of the ocean of our lives, right? So it's interesting stuff. But I regress. The following card that we have on the table for today is the Four of Cups. So we have someone who is in some kind of emotional contemplation. They have a situation that they are satisfied with, but they're also contemplating something new. They're contemplating something unknown. And it's likely that this Venus relationship with this aspect towards Uranus is going to bring something new into our lives. That's going to get us to contemplate an area of relationship in our lives. And it doesn't have to be just romantic relationship. It could also be, business relationships. It could be business partnerships. It could be friendships too, because of where, other planets are placed as well. So it just depends on where these planets show up in your own individual chart as far as how they're actually going to be, like what lens they're going to be in, as far as that goes. Now, this card is further clarified by the Eight of Wands, which I just want to point out is interesting because this is our third eight that we have in the reading for this week. We started off with the Eight of Pentacles, then we also had the Eight of Cups, and now we have the Eight of Wands. So the only one in this set that we are missing is the Eight of Swords. The Eight of Wands is things being up in the air, things not being settled. It also could be new messages coming in, new beginnings coming in that are making you really, really evaluate where you want to put your will and where you can put your effort. And until things land a little bit, you may have a really hard time deciphering that. And that can bring in some big changes, some big considerations. Now that is further clarified by the Ten of Swords, which is a bit of a heavy card because we see someone who is being paralyzed by their mental realm. They're being paralyzed by their thoughts, stuck in the mind, being kind of their own worst enemy in that way. And so we have to consider our tools, right? We have the tools of the intuition, we have tools of the mind, we have tools of labor, and how do we want to engage ourselves and where do we put our attention? Because you can put your attention on the mind and watch what it thinks and what it says in your inner dialogue, and you can have it do math problems, you can have it form sentences for you, you can have the mind do a lot of different things and set your attention on that and just observe it. Like you don't have to be your mind, so to speak. You can also put your attention on your emotions, and you can put your attention on relationship. You can put your attention on the body, on its physical, exertion or its pain or just its physical state in of itself. You can put your attention on a lot of different things that are your tools. You can also have your tools work together. You can have the mind focus on where to put the attention in your body so that you don't feel pain. You can have it focus on your breath, for instance. You can engage the body to bring relief to the emotions or bring relief to angst of the emotions and even angst of the mind. We have all these tools that we can use together to bring balance to one another, or we can put all of our attention in one single center of our being and paralyze ourselves from it, which is ultimately what's happening with the Ten of Swords. We see someone who has a crystallized idea of how things should be, and they're paralyzed because of it. Now, the goal in this situation, when you have the Ten of Swords, is ultimately to get back down to the Ace of Swords, which is interesting. So it's interesting that they both showed up in the reading for this week because the 10 is just a higher level of 1, or the crystallized idea around the 1. So we do need to watch where we have this definition or certainty, because the certainty in of itself can close down the options that are actually available to us. Now, we still have 2 other cards left on the table. one of which is the Death card. This is the card that is associated with the sign of Scorpio, transformation, and burning the bridge behind you. I think it's really interesting that this card has shown up, especially with Venus currently in the sign of Scorpio and Pluto making its last little stint in the sign of Capricorn, which it will be leaving in November, which is the time frame of Scorpio in the year. So there is a transformation that is coming about, that is bringing about a big shift and possibly an ending to something for a rebirthing and new beginning to happen. And that is along this axis of the Scorpio Taurus axis in our charts. Now, this is finally clarified by the Four of Wands, which is a card of rest, relaxation, and respite and celebration. We see these people gathering under what looks to be a canopy of sorts that's out in a beautiful yard, in this, with these nice beautiful buildings behind them, or structures behind them. So there's some kind of celebration, some kind of peace and safety and security that is going to be coming out of this big change. But ultimately we have to let go of that which isn't useful, that which is preventing us from moving forward, and we have to, shed the skin of the past to be reborn. Hence the phoenix that is rising out of the ashes here in the background of this card. So this is going to be a powerful couple of weeks for us, especially with this interplay between Uranus and Venus up in the sky that's going to be happening a little bit over a week. But Uranus is always going to be bringing change wherever it goes. And you would have noticed that Uranus has been bringing this change in the sign of Taurus since about 2019. So it's working on that area of our chart. We also have the planet of Pluto, which is kind of wrapping up its stint in the sign of Capricorn. And it has been in the sign of Capricorn since 2008. So there's something that is coming to some kind of resolution from that time period that was begun in that time frame. And it also is bringing about some kind of transformation, because that is, after all, the planet that governs Scorpio and is the planet that brings about change and transformation. So powerful reading this week. If you watch the sky at all tonight when the sun goes down, keep a look out to the western horizon and you will see Venus and possibly Mercury as well. Oh, no, Mercury you won't see it for a little while because it's too close to the sun. But you will see Venus, and you'll also see the waxing moon kind of just ahead of it. And then the moon will continue to grow full, so it'll get further and further away from Venus as the month progresses along. If you're interested in a reading, feel free to reach out. If there was something that was especially helpful to you in this reading and you'd like to know more about it, feel free to comment and let me know. If there's any content that you would like me to explain or talk about, I would also suggest that you leave a note below, because as we go into winter, I'll be creating more things to put online to help people understand astrology. I send you a good wish, and I hope you are well, and I send you a lot of love wherever you are. Bye for now.